Welcome to this webinar. We will begin in a few moments as a lot of participants are just logging in. Give us a couple of minutes. Thank you. Narendra, can you start, please?
Yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed guest speaker, Shri K. Ramasubramaniam, who is going to speak on a very crucial subject, changes in FEMA during COVID-19 era. Shri Ramasubramaniam retired as General Manager of Reserve Bank of India after 35 years of long service. The first four letters of his name, RAMA, have a unique correlation to one of the most important transformation in India's globalization, that is from FERA to FEMA. And I say so because he was member of the senior officials team at RBI that drafted FEMA in 1999 and ensured its smooth transition and implementation thereafter. Since year 2002, he has been advising corporates on all matters relating to foreign exchange. He is guiding force behind many cross-border acquisitions by Indian companies, investments in and out of India, and ECBs. He is on the board of few listed and unlisted companies as an independent director, adding value in their corporate governance. He also functions as a domain expert on FEMA in UK Court of Arbitration and Singapore Court of Arbitration. Friends, we now look forward for an enlightening session with Sri Ramasubramaniam, and I hand over the proceedings to him. One request, after his talk, we'll be having a question and answer session. Participants are requested to ask their questions via Q&A tab. Over to Shri Ramasubramaniam.
Thank you, Mahajani, for a nice introduction. You have made the expectation of our viewing participants, the loving viewing participants, to a high level. I hope I will stand up to their expectation, which will be known at the end of the session. Well, today it coincided with the governor's address to the nation regarding the various changes that he has announced. Most among them are not very happy one. Now, first of all, the whole announcement today results in more of creation of liquidity, elongating the obligation of repayment, and also highlights some of the concessions that he has announced from the monetary point of view. In addition, his concern for the negative growth which is likely to happen in the Indian economy. Well, in this background, what the background that we have, that when we look at the external sector of India, which is the focus of today's webinar, that we are in a situation where the merchandise exports have fallen down substantially. And we also expect, because of the incidence of pandemic corona across the world, particularly in the major buyers of our product, namely the USA and the Europe, they are likely to cancel more than 50% of the orders that they have already placed. Only in this context, what the steps that are being taken, or which we have to focus today, relates to those steps which are being taken by the Government of India on the one side and the Reserve Bank of India on the other side. the steps that the government of India proposes fall into two broad categories. One is that how do they uh, change the fiscal policy to enable India to improve its external sector on one side. Then for effecting that, they have two mechanisms. One is the export-import policy. Two is the customs requirement, which are, so to say, a physical control, but they also have certain fiscal control by means of relaxation of the various tariffs, excise, custom duty, etc. So far as the monetary side is concerned, it also consists of two types of regulatory measures. One relating to the forex control and regulation, or in today's parlance, forex management, and the other is the credit management. So in this thing, so in all, we are going to look at what are the changes that have been recently made consequent to the occurrence of the pandemic corona from the government side, and what are the changes that the Reserve Bank of India has included in the regulation of the external sector of India. As we all know, the government has done, most importantly, the foreign trade policy, which was announced for the last 5 years, commencing from 2015 to 2020. The same policy is extended for a period up to March 2021. Thus, there is no new change or no new introduction so far as the foreign trade policy is concerned. They have also continued the interest equalization scheme, thereby the interest cost of the exporters have been compensated to the extent of 3% at least till March 2021. Next slide, please. Manish, next slide. The other concession that we want is for the corporate, the employees' provident fund and the insurance, that there is a request for waiver, but there is only a deferment is allowed, but total waiver has not yet been considered. Then the other from the credit angle, the existing pre-shipment and post-shipment, which becomes overdue, there is a demand for increasing that overdue period beyond the date of overdue by 90 to 180 days. Now, the governor, what he said in 11th October 2019, which has been captured here, which was very, very optimistic and positive. But in today's address, the whole picture has diametrically changed to the opposite side. With the increased fall in export to the extent of 60%, and equally the fall in import almost to the extent of 60%, have made our trade deficit a very, very challenging one. So far as the service exports are concerned, as you know, the IT sector and service sector compensated to the extent of more than 45% of India's trade account on the receipt side. That has also been affected due to the USA and European situation of pandemic corona. But the comforting factor is that we have crossed all these hurdles of trade deficit for a long time, and our strategy so far has been successful. And I hope newer and newer dimensions will start coming up to solve all these things. Yeah. Now, what are all the challenges that we have, which calls for a look, a somewhat concentrated look of post-corona situation? Number one, the focus should be on increasing the merchandise exports, which have lost momentum under the weight of slowing down of the economy, crowned by the corona incident, which is not peculiar to India, but also the global phenomenon. Second, due to this kind of a thing, the import demand has also come down. With the result, the non-oil and non-gold imports have got negative indication suggesting that the productive activity in India is going to be seriously affected. Third and most important, the capital market of the India was functioning with a large infusion of foreign funds in the nature of foreign institutional investment, foreign portfolio investment, and foreign direct investment, that there has been an outflow of this consequent to the slowdown and the pandemic, and more than $2 billion have already gone outside India by way of disinvestment in that. And this kind of a portfolio capital movement have got a telling effect on, number one, the domestic capital market, number two, on the debt market, and number three, on the forex market, and last but not the least, the asset prices have come down. Many of the assets have eroded. Investors' values have been continuously eroded because of this kind of a pandemic effect. Now, in this scenario, it is not a very comfortable situation, but what should be our strategy for going ahead? Overall, the external sector is, I would call it as a, we must have a cautious optimism, because despite all these kind of downward indicators in that, India continues to be some kind of a shining thing among all the global situation. So therefore, despite these downside risks, we will still have an optimistic view with a caution, with adequate caution. Now, how do we overcome this? That we have to search for the newer export market and newer niches in our product, and also the IT and IT-enabled companies should focus on increasing their market diversification. Where newer skills and newer technologies are coming up, they are to be honed to the advantages of that. I am also aware that due to the migrant Indians who are outside India are being rehabilitated into this, which will have a telling effect on the inward remittances, which we are comfortable in receiving from our non-resident brethren. But that is also going to be a little affected, because already plane loads of our foreigners have, non-resident Indians have been relocated into India. But one silver lining is, because of the trade war, which is very, I need not elaborate on that, because of the trade war, opportunities are available to attract for relocation into India. You are already aware, one of the best shoe companies of German origin has already relocated from China to India in Delhi. Therefore, this kind of a situation, the Director General of Foreign Trade is administering the export-import policy, and export transactions, as you know, being a foreign exchange transaction, are to be compulsorily routed through the authorized dealer of banks in India, subject to the foreign trade policy, as also the rules framed by the Reserve Bank of India under various provisions of FEMA. Next, please. Yeah. Now, when we while I will go into this kind of a changes, first into the export segment, second into the import segment, and third into the various capital account transaction, consisting of the external commercial borrowings, number one, the overseas direct investment, number two, and number three is the foreign direct investment, and last but not the least, a little on the foreign institutional investment and foreign portfolio investment. Now, when you come to the exports are to be done with reference to the guidelines of FEMA, where export is defined as one where a physical goods of India is being sent abroad, whose consideration is to be realized and repatriated into India. In other words, the export consists of two legs of transaction of moving the goods from Indian soil to outside India and realizing the proceeds thereof overseas and repatriating that, and such repatriation reaching into India. When both the legs are completed, the export is deemed to have been accomplished by any resident in India. As far as the services are concerned, these services are to be exercised from India. It is not that I go to Dubai on a personal visit and there I do some consultancy or addressing some session and getting some remuneration for that does not amount to rendering service outside India. So therefore, we have to keep in mind that these are two uh, separate definitions of goods as well as services. Now, how do they regulate? These are regulated by means of certain declarations known as export declaration form for physical goods, soft text form for the purpose of IT and IT enabled services, and so far as other services are concerned, the invoice forms the basis of document for export transaction. Now, every exporter, as I told, has to realize the export process within the prescribed period, where consequent to COVID and the international illiquidity situation has been extended from the conventional 9 months to the 15 months from the date of shipment. The date of shipment in our with reference to FEMA relates to the date of bill of lading in the case of physical export, and in the case of service export, it relates to the date of invoice. The export proceeds should be realized both in a freely convertible foreign exchange as also in Indian rupees, provided the invoice is denominated in Indian rupees. Export can be realized from, this is another concession because of the international trade taking newer and newer dimensions. Sometimes the exports are made to Korea, but the proceeds will be coming from Dubai. In such cases also, these are called as payment from third party, which is also covered under the guidelines of export regulations. Next. So far as as I told earlier, all along till the 1st April 2020, the normal period of realization and repatriation of export was kept at a duration of 9 months from the date of shipment. But considering the adverse impact of liquidity problem or financial problem across the globe, the Indian exporters have been allowed to realize their export process within a period of 15 months from the date of shipment of the goods. Suppose within this period, wherever re-import is made due to non-acceptance of the goods by the overseas importer, such re-imports are also considered as having full realization of the value. Now, let me focus a little on the current subject for which we are discussing, is that what exactly the Reserve Bank has done so far as the impact of COVID is concerned. Now, the major change that they have done is that the period of realization is extended from 9 months to 15 months. What does it mean? What does it mean? That next slide, please. It means that exports made on 1st May 2019 in the normal circumstances would have been realized by 9 months, which is by 1st February 2020. Such exports should have been realized to be a regular standard export. However, if it is not realized on 1st February 2019, this new circular enables such exports to be realized till 31st July 2020, and such realization are eligible for all kinds of incentives available from the export-import policy. So therefore, the exporters who are in difficulty of realization can get this proceed till 31st July. So, or 15 months from the date of export, whichever is later. Now, when you come to this period of outstanding extending beyond 9 months in respect of old exports, is it necessary to apply for extension when this 9 month period is nearing? The answer is no. Automatically, the period of realization gets extended to 15 months as per the instructions of 1st April 2020 issued by the Reserve Bank. Now, as regards the route by which the inward remittance comes, as you all know, it is by means of what is known as normal banking channel, which means that the proceeds should come through an authorized dealer in India from a banker of the importer country. Now, payment by third party also should come through normal banking channel. Now, another aspect of the export trade is relating to the advance payment received by the export. Whenever the exporting commodity is a monopoly for that commodity, he can always command an advance payment of even up to 100% of the export value by way of advance payment. Such facilities are allowed provided the export take place within 1 year from the date of receipt of the advance payment. This advance payment is to be refunded in case the export do not materialize within a period of 1 year from the date of inward remittance. Now, in some cases, most cases, there is no charging of interest, but if in some cases the overseas importer insists on levying a interest on the advance remittance made, there is a ceiling of LIBOR plus 100 basis points, which can also be contracted at the time of entering into initial purchase contract itself. Now, export document should be submitted to the same AD bank through whom the advance remittance has been received. This is to enable that the advance remittance that has been received is fully utilized by way of corresponding export to the same person to the same country or to the same description of the buyer to whom this has been done. Now, there are several situations in the export trade where realization either does not take place totally or take place partly. So in such a situation, what does the guideline say? One, suppose the pairs of parties, that means the Indian exporter, Mr. A, is sending to Mr. B certain goods in Korea, and Mr. B also sends certain goods to Mr. A by way of supply from Korea. So in this situation, there will be an export taking place from India. There is an import taking place into India by the same parties, namely A and B from India and Korea. In such situation, it is allowed to set off this instead of inflow of foreign exchange and outflow of foreign exchange. A facility of set off is given to the Indian exporter that such outstanding export and import can be set off under the automatic route. Second is suppose in some cases the export is getting delayed for payment. In such cases, the exporter has got the option of approaching the authorized dealer as well as the Reserve Bank for extension of time, indicating clearly as to by what time the final proceeds will be received into India. Wherever the extension is not within the delegated powers of the authorized dealer, applications are to be made to the Reserve Bank of India, who will give consent based on a case-to-case basis on merits. Now, many a time, the invoice value, what is there, could not be realized due to quality defects, which differ from the order placed by the overseas importer. In such cases, if the reduction claimed by the overseas buyer is reasonable, there is a provision to allow reduction in invoice value and enabling the AD to accept the reduction and pass the bill for full realization. This is another avenues available in export guideline. And next is sometimes the amount of export is totally not realized for one reason or other, because the overseas importer has gone into liquidation, or he is gone out of business, or his financial conditions do not permit any kind of remittance outside. There are other creditors which are having a preference over the Indian exporter in such circumstances where on the basis of genuineness of such crimes, the total amount of export can be written off. But then, if you give this kind of a thing without any limit, it will totally rub off the total inward remittance towards export. So there are internal limits set by the Reserve Bank. So far as self-write-off is concerned, that is restricted to 5% of the total realization in the past 1 year. Up to that, on the basis of a statutory auditor's declaration, the exporter can approach the AD for writing off the export realization. In case the exporter is located in SEZ or is a export-oriented unit with star rating, he can write off up to 10% of the last net foreign exchange realization of the last year. Similarly, the authorized dealers are also empowered to give approvals for writing off up to the extent of 10% of the realization in the previous year. Now, anything which is in excess of that, the total amount to be written off falls in excess of the delegated power to the exporter himself under self-write-off or under the delegated power to the authorized dealers. When the amount is going to exceed this prefixed limits, then write-off is to be given only by the Reserve Bank of India against specific application made thereto. So these are some of the aspects which are the control exercised by the Reserve Bank from the foreign exchange side under FEMA. Now there is also another area where the Reserve Bank is operating, which is exercising or regulating control over this export phenomenon, which is called the credit side. The credit side is controlled by three aspects of three parameters. One, the amount of credit that is going to be given by the commercial bank. Number two, the rate of interest that is to be charged on the credit facilities provided by the commercial bank. Number three, the duration for which it is to be done. Fourth, is there any minimum price or minimum obligation on the Indian exporter? And last but not the least, the realization in foreign exchange based on that the eligibility for various incentives are open for the Indian exporter. Now, when you look at the export credit scheme as a whole, the export credit is broadly divided into two major categories. One is known as the pre-shipment credit, the other is post-shipment credit. And both are available to be denominated either in Indian rupee or in foreign exchange. Similarly, post-shipment credit is also available in Indian rupees as also in foreign currency. The fundamental difference in the case of post-shipment credit in rupees and foreign exchange is that the exchange risk is borne by either the importer or the exporter. So this is the specialty of this kind of a discrimination between Indian rupee and foreign exchange. Now, so far as the interest rate is concerned, these are governed in detail by the circular dated July 15, which has been amended from time to time. Since it is a very lengthy one, I leave the audience to refer to this circular for details. Now, as far as the duration is concerned, the duration is pretty long, in the sense 9 months or 15 months, different types of credits are available. Next, please. This completes, to summarize, the export is covered on various aspects of government policy, as also the monetary policy through foreign exchange, as also rupee credit funding. Now, I will move on to certain developments in the case of import. Not much of a thing with reference to pandemic corona, but in general, certain things have been made. One, so far as the import means, by definition, import means goods of foreign origin landing into India mind you, landing into India means it should come into the country, not in the port. If it is kept in the port warehouse, then such imports are not considered as full import because they have not yet landed into our country for captive use. So they may be importing only for re-exporting. So such goods are not considered as full import, although payment therefore can be allowed. So one is that the importer who is drawing foreign exchange for the purpose of import should show evidence of using that for the purpose of import only. Now, when this is done, the authorized dealer who is handling this kind of import transaction goes into number one, whether the importer is having an import-export code issued by the DGFT, whether the goods which are imported are covered within the import-export policy of the Government of India, which is extended up to March 2021, and whether these goods are imported under specific licenses or it is on an open general license category, and the release of foreign exchange only after the authorized dealer is satisfied that this is a genuine underlying import contract for which the customer is demanding sale of foreign exchange. Now, earlier there was a specific application of Form A1 which has been discontinued. Now, on the basis of declaration, ADs are allowed to release foreign exchange either by debiting the customer's account for rupee equivalent or by means of checks issued by other banks. No cash transaction is allowed for purchasing the foreign exchange towards import payment. The authorized dealer is continuing to follow up with the importer to produce the evidence for reaching the goods into India for which the corresponding payment has emanated from India through the authorized dealer. Such payment is allowed for a period of 6 months. That means if the date of shipment, which is indicated by the date of bill of lading, to the date of payment can be up to 6 months from the date of shipment. In case the payment is delayed beyond the 6 months, then the authorized dealer has to give the permission for delayed payment of export. Now, anything which is delayed beyond 6 months can be considered as a trade credit under the guidelines of external commercial borrowing, so that it goes out of the purview of the general import guideline. Now, if this is not a trade credit and it is not an ECB, the payment, whenever it is delayed beyond 6 months, the authorized dealer can give extension of payment six months at a time for a maximum period of 3 years from the date of shipment. Now, there is also a limit up to which the authorized dealers have been delegated powers for extension, provided suppose the last import remittance in the last 2 years is of 100 crores on an average, then up to 10 crore extension will be given by the authorized dealer for delayed payment of export. And after this delay, there is an obligation on the part of the AD as well as the importer to log on these details of extension in the IDPML data maintained by the Reserve Bank. Now, the most important aspect of regulation is every dollar that goes outside India is under the import transaction should be evidenced by document that corresponding goods or services have received into India. So for which the document prescribed by the customs authorities is known as the bill of entry. So every import transaction, irrespective of the value of the importer has to produce the bill of entry duly certified as duty paid bill of entry. Because unless the duty is paid, the bill of entry will not be cut by the customs authorities. Now, after the introduction of this IDPMS data, bill of entry can be downloaded from the IDPMS data, and the import can be, outward remittance can be marked off by getting this master bill of entry from the IDPMS data. Now, there are certain port situations where it has not yet been digitalized. In such cases, manual reporting is also permissible. Now, there are several cases of RBI is pursuing on these outstanding cases where particularly those up to transactions up to 2016, there are various practical problems faced by the Indian importer and exporter in complying with the outstanding cases of this. There will be many questions on this issue, which we will cover in the question and answer session. Now, the listed companies with high net worth are also given certain powers by means of declaration that these exports have been, or exports have been accomplished, or the imports have been accomplished, but there is no proof of the bill of entry, as the customs do not issue in olden time duplicate bill of entry. So when corroborative evidence in place of bill of entry is not available, the Indian corporates, which are listed companies with large net worth, are given a facility of declaration to adjust the outstanding import submission of bill of entry. Next, please. Yeah, to sum up this, both the thing export and import in common term, these are referred to a part of current account transactions under the FEMA. So the FEMA guidelines are only enabling for an orderly growth of trade between India and outside India, and most of the procedures are now simplified. Documents have been minimized, and all are captured through digital mechanism. So because of that, there is a audit trail is available both for the convenience of Reserve Bank, the Government of India, the importer and exporter. Now, the EDPMS and IDPMS have already stabilized since its introduction, and system by itself will identify all the set parameters so that automatically errant or defaulting exporter or importer are caution listed automatically, and the compliance becomes mandatory and in a transparent manner. So to have this comprehensive one, if one has to enter into the field of this, a common knowledge of these procedures is a minimum requirement in the export and import transaction. Now, having said this on the area of current account transaction, let us dwell a little on the capital account transaction. First and foremost, we should understand what we mean by a capital account transaction. In terms of definition, it is in FEMA, there is the students of FEMA will agree with me that there is an interesting aspect of FEMA. FEMA says a matter is there, and if it is not there, it is not there. There is no situation of yes and or no. There is no question of anything in between yes or no. They partly yes, partly no, no. If it is yes, it is yes. And if it is no, it is no. That's all. There is nothing like in between yes or no. Although in life situation, there are many occasions where the reality is in between yes or no. But for the sake of easy administration of the FEMA recognizes only events which are positive or negative, in compliance or non-compliant. So the capital account transaction is defined through the current account transaction. A capital account transaction is one which is not a current account transaction, and a current account transaction is one where the inflow or outflow of foreign exchange transaction represent the underlying movement of goods or services from India or outside India. So whereas in the case of a capital account transaction, there need not be a movement of goods or services. It amounts to a kind of a change in the balance sheet of the resident and change in the balance sheet of the non-resident. So whenever a foreign exchange transaction takes place, there are two parties involved. One, a resident in India, another is a non-resident who is outside India. If an Indian is receiving certain amount from a non-resident, it means there is an inflow of foreign exchange. That inflow of foreign exchange forms an asset in the books of the Indian resident. Similarly, if the Indian resident is remitting something in return for what he has received earlier, it goes outside his balance sheet and it becomes an asset in the books of the non-resident. Thus, changes in assets and liabilities due to inflow or outflow of foreign exchange can be generalized as a thumb rule represent capital account transaction. The capital account transactions that are generally regulated under the FEMA fall into four broad categories. One is external commercial borrowing, which means these are known as external commercial borrowing. Mind you, what is the emphasis on commercial borrowing means these borrowings are not in the nature of sovereign borrowing. This is to exclude sovereign borrowing. These are done by Indian corporates and Indian residents from the external sector by means of inflow of foreign exchange. So that is why these are referred to as external commercial borrowing. Now, this is one of the aspects of the Indian capital account transaction, which has got a limit of 750 million per individual borrowing. So annual limits are there. Certain detailed guidelines are there. Recently, one of the major change that has been taken place, more or less coinciding with the incidence of COVID, is that if there is a overseas shareholder in an Indian corporate, he is a shareholder and he is willing to lend money to the Indian corporate in which he has got a shareholding of not less than 25% of the paid-up capital of the company. In such cases, he can lend to the Indian corporate in the form of external commercial borrowing for the various stated purposes to the extent of 7 times of his holding. Or in other words, the borrowing against the equity holding is in the ratio of 7:1, which is a very big opening for Indian corporates to access external sector for inflow of money. And such monies are coming at a very, very competitive interest rate. So if the various uses of that, earlier the external commercial bank borrowing was restricted only for capital transaction. Now they are available for all kinds of transaction, including general corporate expenses, even including repayment of the rupee debt in India. So such a wide opening is there in external commercial borrowing, so that those competent, eligible Indian borrowers can access the easy interest rate situation prevailing outside India based on their creditworthiness for borrowing. As regards the overseas investment, not much of a change has brought about, except the limit for automatic route has been enhanced to 400% of the net worth, and it has been done. A lot of issues are there in the overseas investment in the matter of issue of guarantees to the step-down subsidiary, opening up step-down subsidiaries, the round-tripping issues, the issue of setting up of 2 or 3 levels of special purpose vehicles overseas. These are all the issues which still defy a definite solution. Another very, very irritating area in the administration of overseas investment is that guarantees by the bank are allowed only when the Indian company has got more than 51% of shareholding in the overseas company. Now, there are many countries which have put a restriction that the foreign investment cannot exceed more than 49%. Therefore, there will be access to the Reserve Bank for waiver of this condition, which in a few cases the RBI has considered favorably, but it depends on a case-to-case basis. So far as the foreign direct investment is concerned, everyone is aware of the recent change which has been highlighted in the media, is that the Bank of China has acquired an additional share in the company HDFC, which is a housing major in India, by means of increasing their holding from 0.7% to almost more than 2% or about 2%. Exact figure is less than 2. So this attracted or this triggered the question whether due to this slowdown in our economy, due to the falling prices, due to the adverse impact in the capital market of India, due to the occurrence of corona across the world, whether there is a move to have lot of acquisition of Indian company at a lower value. Such a fear has happened. So the automatic route which was available for entry into this kind of a segment by means of a foreign portfolio investor duly registered with SEBI, such an access under the automatic route has since been closed. And now any country which is bordering the geography of India all around, if they want to acquire the stakes in Indian companies, they have to come through a specific approval route which is administered by the government of India, whereas the automatic route is administered by the Reserve Bank of India. This is one of the major change that we have in foreign direct investment. The second, the government of India as well as the RBI is already looking into opportunities that are available for some of the industries which are trying to relocate from their present location to a comfortable location, and such a trend is visible in the international global market, and India is trying to seize that opportunity for inviting that. And you may recall that in the recent finance minister speech also, they have identified that there are several hectares of land are available in the present special economic zone as well as in other export zones. All these lands are available for immediate relocation by those entities which want to relocate from their existing location. This, in short, is the broad overview of the development that have taken place both from the post-COVID changes by the government of India as well as the Reserve Bank of India. Thank you for listening. Now I am ready to answer any question that is shoot from the audience.
So there is one question by one gentleman. He says, in case of free sample shipment.
Pardon?
There is one question which says that in case of free sample shipment, if the shipping bill is generated by a courier company, how to write off such transaction?
Yes, actually, if you there is up to 5% of the last year's export realization, authorized dealers can allow this waiver of such samples. So you have to go to the authorized dealer, show him the realization, and these are in the nature of samples by means of correspondence from this. There are companies in India which are undertaking the kind of sending to various buyers across the thing. Samples are sent, and such couriers are considered as free of sample in some cases. In some cases, if it is done on behalf of an overseas brander, the overseas fellow is reimbursing that expenses to the Indian service provider. This is possible.
Thank you. While I strongly suggest that people type in questions in the Q&A section of the presentation. Sir, if you could also, explain that a lot of companies now want to bill their customers in INR. So how will this money come back in convertible foreign exchange? Rupee invoicing, how does it work?
Yeah, actually, yeah, this is a very very good question, Manish. Thank you. when the exchange risk is to be borne by the overseas party, the Indian exporter would like to invoice his bill in Indian rupees. Invoicing in Indian rupees is permissible provided the inward remittance is coming from a country which is not included in the FATF countries, and this is not related to our enemy countries. Now, the inward remittance will come in the form of foreign exchange if it is coming that, or if it is coming through a bank which is having a Vastu account in India maintained in Indian rupees, then that from that Vastu account, the rupee equivalent or rupee is debited and paid to the Indian company who has invoiced in Indian rupees. So this is coming, the inward remittance is in either in foreign exchange or debit of Indian rupees from the Vastu account. Debit of Indian rupees in Vastu account is also considered as realization in free foreign exchange, and the exporter who has done invoicing in Indian rupees is equally eligible for all the incentives that are paid by the government of India towards realization and repatriation of exports.
Thank you. Next question is, we have to fill Form A2 for payment for the nature of services where the invoice is more than 5 years. What is the solution?
And,
Somebody has a payment for services which is 5 years old, and he has to do an E2 payment. So, do we require an approval?
Yes, it requires approval because the services payment or in the case of services, that is import of services, is also having the same period as that of import of goods. So therefore, this should have been done within 6 months, and if no extension is allowed by the authorized dealer, this becomes an overdue import payment. And an overdue import payment, which is overdue for more than 5 years, requires specific prior approval of the Reserve Bank. The application for approval is to be routed through the authorized dealer who has handled this import or the invoice, and he will verify the correctness of the requirement of thing, and there should be a confirmation of accepting the payment by the overseas recipient without any interest for the overdue. And such approvals are given by the Reserve Bank on a case-to-case basis.
Thank you, sir. So, gentlemen, if you need an approval, please connect with us. We can help you try and get an approval for you.
Yes.
The next question is, RBI is already permitting 360 days for payment against raw material of imports of raw material. Today's announcement extending import remittance into 12 months. So what is the difference between the 360 days stand earlier and today's announcement?
Actually, there is no much difference. It is 360 days only. There is actually no difference. It is only reiterating the present one. So whether you make it 1 year from this or this, the thing is whether it is coming to be a import or it becomes a trade credit. So to differentiate that, you need a time limit. So for that time limit, they have put 360 days. And if it exceeds 360 days, it ceases to be a normal cash import. It becomes a trade credit, which is governed by different set of guidelines.
So next question is, if import supply is made by another company and payment is made on pro forma invoice to another supplier as an advance, how can that be settled? So it's saying that import advance is made to party X, import has come from party Y. How do we settle that?
Yes. This is called a third-party transaction. So in such cases, there are, for example, some of the MNCs have got their global purchase system centralized in one place. To give you an example, Guskin and Williams or GSK, they have got a global purchase center located in UK, London. So that is purchasing for all the global units across their subsidiaries, across their parent company. A single source of purchasing mechanism is there. So therefore, the order will be placed by the respective unit in South Korea. Let us say Siemens Korea wants to import something from India. So Siemens Korea is placing the order, but the payment will come from London because that is a centralized agency like that. In such cases where this payment takes place, so such a payment mechanism through a third party is to be agreed at the time of contract itself as a three party, and the payment will come within the prescribed period from the identified party who is the third party to the transaction. If such a thing is there, ADs can accept a third party payment for export made to Korea from this thing. Earlier, this facility was not there, so we have to go to the RBI explaining the case by case, and specific approvals were given. Now it is given, it is in a very transparent manner, the conditions are in public domain. But before entering into the transaction, this third party payment is to be indicated and agreed upon. It should not happen that the third party comes into the play after the export transaction has been completed. So in such cases, outstanding payment cannot be made by a third party, which will give rise to certain kind of transactions which are not envisaged as a normal trade transaction. I hope you understand what I mean.
Sir, next question is somebody is saying that we have raised an invoice in USD. I assume it's for exports. Can we get payment in INR from the customer?
Always you are getting the payment in Indian rupees only. Only the bank is receiving that amount in free foreign exchange, and therefore it is coming to the bank in foreign exchange, and you are getting an Indian rupees. So always you are getting an Indian rupees, although you are supposed to have received that in realization of invoice in. Now, in case change of currency is there, particularly in Indian rupees, it is better to invoice that originally in Indian rupees itself without changing it during the course of the transaction.
Thank you. Sir, next question. Can we make import payments through our corporate credit card? Import payments through corporate credit card.
Yes, import payment can be made through the corporate credit card, subject to the limits in the international credit card. Because many of the online transactions are taking place through credit card payments. So many of the online, suppose I want to order something in from US and I'm getting a particular software to that, this is online, and that is done through this payment gateway by means of this credit card system only. So payments is allowed through credit cards, international credit card.
Sir, next question is, I'm in James and Jewelry business. Can I manufacture for a foreign company on job work basis? And how should one treat the import and export of goods after it is manufactured? And how should the invoicing be made?
Very good question. This is called that I am engaging myself as an intermediate activity. Many a cases, many a time, the product in semi-processed way, it is supplied to me, then I am adding my own manufacturing to that product, and I am finishing that product, or 90% of the product is finished and it is re-exported to the person to whom it is there. So in this case, I am importing on payment without any payment. I am getting it as a raw material, and he continues to have a title on this, and I am adding value, which I enter into a contract of rendering service for processing this product from X stage to Y stage, which is involving the cost. That cost, by means of process agent, I enter into an agreement. Based on that unit wise, I load that and invoice for the only services rendered by me or the value added by me, including my margin of profit. Then it is re-exported, because there you need a waiver, because there won't be any realization of the value of the export, but you will only realize the value that you have added to the original commodity that has been imported. So such things are also permitted is under the foreign exchange, and the company which is processing this is entitled to the value added to that product, which becomes the finished product for his export.
Thank you, sir. So, next question is, if a country is facing externalization problem and is unable to remit foreign currency, how to write off such export bills?
Very good question. Yes, there are the externalization, the term, the questioner is aware, but for the knowledge of others, the issue of externalization means the country has got their own local currency, but they do not have adequate supply of foreign exchange to make payment for overseas supplies. In such cases, there is a kind of a rationing in that country where they make payment in installment, and in some cases it is not possible for that country to make payment. Such situations are non-payment due to externalization problems of that country. In such cases, we have to give a documentary evidence to the Reserve Bank from the Indian Embassy that this country is having externalization problem and it does not have foreign exchange to make payment. And if that amount to be written off is within 5% of the net foreign exchange realization that has taken place in the last year, then with the auditor's certificate and along with the embassy's certificate that externalization problem is there, the entire amount can be written off at the level of AD itself. Now, in case it is exceeding 10% of the realization, then it will be referred to the Reserve Bank for writing off this.
Thank you.
Suppose in certain cases there may be dispute that the overseas importer has paid in local currency, but it has not been repatriated because of externalization problem. In such cases, if the Indian exporter is willing to wait for resolution of this issue till this external, or if his overseas buyer is in queue for realization of rationing the available foreign exchange, time may be given to the Indian exporter for realization that within the delegated powers of AD as well as approval from the RBI.
Sir, next question. In IDPMS, banks are not able to get bill of entry generated from customs at the airport. When we can expect the system for these bill of entries to be generated from airport?
Yes, you are right. This is a very serious problem. This problem is particularly in respect of imports which have taken place prior to the introduction of IDPMS. So the IDPMS data shows all these import payments are outstanding in the IDPMS system. Even import made prior to this introduction of IDPMS also will be showing as outstanding. Now, there is another problem. The customs will not issue a duplicate bill of entry. So, in such cases, a professional help is required for them to prove that in the case of listed companies with more than 100 crore net worth, a declaration by the managing director or competent key management personnel is allowed for waiver of this bill of entry. But in all other cases, the Reserve Bank of India will examine the correctness of payment as also receipt of goods into India by means of surrogate document. Instead of bill of entry, because no duplicate bill of entry is possible, there will be surrogate document. For example, if the Indian company who has imported has paid the duty by means of a check, which categorically says that is a payment towards duty, and that duty will be accounted by the customs with reference to particular import only. When they can corroborate and say that this duty has been paid, so this is an evidence that the goods have landed into India in his name, then that is sufficient proof to say that this item can be ticked off in the IDPMS data. So this requires a kind of professional support to such people who are confronting with this kind of problem.
Sir, next interesting question is from somebody who says, a document has gone through UCO Bank for export to Iran, which was denominated in INR, but payment was received from Canara Bank, Dubai. The party converted into euro to INR with Canara Bank in Dubai only and remitted to Canara Bank in India with instructions to transfer to UCO Bank. So,
yeah,
UCO Bank is not accepting the same and is outstanding in EDPMS.
Yes, yes. No, this is, there are very, very interesting situations in the export to Iran. Now, what has happened? Of late, some instances have come where the goods go to Iran, but the payments come from Dubai. Now, so far as the export to Iran, the problem arises because of the sanctions granted by the USA government. Now, till the last November, export from India, as also some 9 other countries, were given certain exemption from the application of US sanction. So, based on that, agricultural commodities, essential commodities, food commodities are allowed to be exported to Iran against the import of oil from Iran. A kind of barter arrangement was done, and administering that barter system was given to UCO Bank. So all export to Iran was settled, whether it is routed through A bank or B bank or C bank, it will be settled ultimately from the barter account with UCO Bank. Now, UCO Bank has got a problem. When the export is made to Iran and payment is coming from Dubai, that too in a currency other than what is denominated in the invoice, UCO Bank has got a problem in making payment or in making adjustment of this Iran import. So, if the case is really genuine, that there is a switch that has taken place, that the goods have been switched from Dubai and hence the payment has originated from Canara Bank Dubai to Canara Bank India, and if that can be documentally proved, a prior approval from the RBI is necessary to resolve such cases. There are cases which we have come across where the one Indian merchant exporter from India sourced goods from Malaysia, the rubber, and this Indian merchanting trader invoiced this to a person in Dubai. Although the goods sourced from Malaysia traveled to Bandar Abbas in Iran, and goods were unloaded in Bandar Abbas, Iran, and the Malaysian man invoiced in Indian merchanting export in euro, and the Indian merchanting trader substituted that Malaysian bill of lading by means of his invoice, he denominated in euro itself, and the payment came from Dubai in euro, but the goods travel to Bandar Abbas. So in such cases, if the bank which is making payment in Dubai is having certain transactions or a nostro account in US, it is exposed to the risk of that dollar account being freezed by the US authority as it amounts to contravention of the US sanction. So therefore, in such cases, one has to be extremely careful. But recently, so far as the Reserve Bank of India is concerned, they have included ACU transaction to fall under ACU Euro, ACU Yen. So if the transactions are settled without the goods landing or originating from Iranian port, nor the goods are carried by Iranian flagged vessels, settlement of import and export transactions do take place in the market.
Great, sir. Sir, next question is, one of our customers could not make payment in rupees, so there was a local invoicing against material supplied to him in India. But he asked his overseas client to remit funds to us against his outstanding. So, somebody told to somebody in India locally, and he could not settle the liability. So he asked his friend overseas to settle the liability on his behalf. Remittance was received from the overseas customer in from overseas in foreign currency, again, for which there was no contract to supply because the supply was made domestically. How can you adjust this against the local dues of the customer?
Very good question. Normally, this transaction is not in the case of a normal permissible transaction because the commercial transaction takes place between resident number 1 to resident number 2. The transaction is between two residents. When one resident is having a commercial transaction with another resident, rupee is the currency, or what we call the legal tender is rupee. The settlement should take place only in terms of rupee. Now, for one reason or the other, the buyer of these goods does not have liquidity, so he is requesting some overseas party to make remittance to this. Now, that overseas party does not have any locus standi with reference to this commercial transaction. Now, at best what he can do, that overseas party can give a loan to this Indian party or a kind of a advance against future export that the Indian party will be making to him, and that process can be utilized towards settlement of the rupee dues. No settlement of rupee invoice can be settled by a third currency or third party's currency.
One request to the participants, since today's topic is related to recent changes on the for the COVID-19 package, please ask your questions on that topic. Rest assured, Ram Subramaniam sir is an encyclopedia. He can answer your every question. But since already we have passed almost 80 minutes, we will answer those questions offline. You can write a mail on the mail ID given over there or on WhatsApp. And COVID-19 questions only we'll be asking now onwards. Sir, I would like to ask a question. You mentioned about the recent circular on the investments by the countries sharing border with India.
Yeah.
If a company has already entered a shareholding agreement, some tranche is received, what happens with the future tranches? Those also need to go through the approval route?
Yes. In case what has happened, suppose the shares have been, sometimes the shares are acquired through stock exchange and the share transaction has already taken place. In such cases, there is no question of stopping the transaction. But if a transaction is going to take place from the date of issue of that circular or the government policy, only such a transaction require prior approval. All whatever has already, because there are almost 1,200 companies in India in which Chinese
He has lost his audio.
I think it will come.
I think his Wi-Fi would have got disrupted.
Friends, I'm sorry, Mr. Ram Subramaniam's internet connection is having a problem, and we may not be able to take any more questions now. So I would request all of you to do write in with your questions, and we will try and see if we can help you answering your questions. So thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you in our other webinars as we keep going forward. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you.